Hey, what is up, Los Angeles, and welcome back to your Los Angeles Rams LAFB show. I am your host, Ryan Anderson, joined today by a very special guest. You know him from the Colts, the Packers, the Bears, and now the Los Angeles Rams. He's covering for The Athletic. Nate Atkins, welcome. How are you doing, and how are you settling into LA?
I'm good, man. It's been just over 2 months since I packed up a car and moved 30 hours from Indianapolis out to LA. And it was kind of crazy because like the first 6 weeks I had like 5 road trips and was gone 11 days between Baltimore and London. And so I haven't really settled in as much as I'd like. I'm getting used to the things that kind of hit you right when you get here. The weather's incredible. The traffic is exactly what people say. The food's wonderful too, though. But I'm excited to, get to settle in a little bit more now that we're home for a bit here. The Rams have had so many weird schedule where it's like all the road games are early and then late, and then the middle of the season's a lot of home games. So bit by bit, I'm going to become a little bit more of an LA resident.
Did you do the travel schedule similarly for the London game, like McVay wanted the team to do? Get there late and out of there.
Yeah. I was with them the whole week in Baltimore. So I was like the only reporter at that Friday practice, and then hopped on an overnight flight and got to London. And luckily we had the bye week after. So I stayed an extra day just to, be able to say I did something in London because I'd never been there before. The only time I've been to Europe was Germany 2 years ago with the Colts. So I definitely wanted to check that out a little bit.
Awesome. Well, for covering the Colts, I had to bring on my Slippery Noodle T-shirt when I visited there for the Combine. What a great time Indy is. Definitely. I mean, you've covered a lot of teams, as I mentioned, 3 different teams. This is your 4th team. I'm always just kind of curious what your perspective is on this Rams building. What's different about it? What kind of sets it apart and makes it unique from other buildings you've been in before?
Yeah, I think last week I sat down with Aubrey Pleasant, the assistant head coach, defensive backs coach, and I thought he put it pretty perfectly where he said, football's fun here, and most people forget about that in this league. And that's kind of what I've found is like it is such a difference from other levels of football when you cover it at this level. It is very businesslike. And that's not to say guys haven't had fun on other teams I've been on. I mean, locker rooms after wins are some of the most fun times. On Fridays, can be very bumping once they finish the practice week and they're just ready for the game. But in general, players in other places just feel that kind of clench of the business all the time because, I mean, it's true here to a point too. Every team's going to cut almost half the roster, in training camp. And as much as you want to, give it your all for a team, everyone kind of realizes that, you're one injury away from being cut as well for most of these players. But here, there's just something a little bit different about it. I think some of it is they show a lot of loyalty. It's a very draft and develop team at this point. They haven't always been that. They used to trade for guys, and they'll still do that on occasion. But they really are a draft and develop and bring out the most in guys. And they just seem to have a way to tap into what players do well and not harp as much on what they don't do well. I thought Emmanuel Forbes is a great example of that, where in Washington, it was such a negative experience for him. And here they've kind of just built him up by reminding him, like, you have the athleticism to be a first-round pick. You've got to earn it here, but, like, you can do this. And they just pour positivity into all these guys. And that obviously starts with Sean McVay. He talks all the time about authentic leadership. And he just brings that up without us really asking about it. But you see the ways that he'll marry kind of his actions with his words. And so he's the first to blame himself after a game. I've seen other coaches do that, but in other places, sometimes it's lip service, or they may mean it in a moment. And then they just coaches often fall back on the habits that they already have. They kind of have this feeling about themselves that like they're the most experienced. So they're the ones with the answers. Sean really challenges himself to find the answers and acknowledge when he doesn't have them. And I thought he really did that after the loss of the 49ers with that 4th and 1 call that everyone, including Sean, knew was not really the way to go with how Stafford was playing in that game, and just the advancements they've made ever since then. And so I'd say that the fun of the building is the biggest difference. And then I felt this when I was with Matthew Stafford in Detroit. It's just a different feeling across a team when you've got that guy at quarterback. And there's just a calmness to every situation, even when they go down by a lot, which hasn't really happened this season. But when you go down in a game or the offense is sputtering, you still feel like you've got that guy who's going to figure it out. And I've been on other teams, and Indianapolis is the kind of the kings of this while I was there, where it's a new quarterback every year, if not 2 in 1 year. And they just don't operate day to day that same way. And so it's not just calmness in a game. It's just every step of the way throughout a week, they just feel like they're going to figure it out. And it helps that this team has the track record. They've been in the playoffs the last 2 years. They won a Super Bowl a few years ago. So they've seen it work already. And that kind of mix of the proof of the concepts of McVay and Stafford, and then just their balance of how calm Stafford is as a personality with how energized McVay is as a personality. It's just created a really good working environment, and not every team has that in this league.
Well, I just realized that I got one of your teams incorrect that you've covered. So thank you for that, putting me on blast.
NFC North still, so it's hard to. I sometimes forget all the teams I've covered at this point.
That's great. Yeah, I mean that's incredible. Erin Coscarelli, I don't know if you've met her out there, but she's been on the show several times. She usually does the Sunday recap with me, and she talks about how, I think it was in reference to Emmanuel Forbes, one of the coaches said that I believe in you are like the 3 most powerful words in a locker room, or something like that. So that really squares up with that. Speaking of locker rooms, you wrote recently that after the first 49ers game, that tough loss that they took in overtime in week 5, that was an angry locker room. And for good reason, right? They probably should have came out with that game in a win. So we fast forward to week 10, a beat down on a beat up San Francisco defense for sure. What was the big change in the locker room? And for fans, it felt like a catharsis, sort of a monkey off the back moment. Is that resonating with the team? Is that the same idea for this coaching staff and team?
Yeah, I think it was relief, really. I had some pushback from 49ers fans that are like, why are they celebrating beating such a beat-up team? And it was like the 49ers were beat up when they played them, a few weeks ago. The only difference there was they had Fred Warner in that game, and they didn't in this one. But they were missing Brock Purdy. In that game, they were missing George Kittle. They had him back in this one. Nick Bosa's been out both of those. But the difference is the Rams took care of business this time. They believed after that game, the reason they were so mad when they lost the 49ers first time is they think they're not just a better team than San Francisco, but a much better team. And so to have let that one slip with just with a slow start and then some really mind-numbing plays between the blocked field goal, which unfortunately is just kind of who they are, but the other ones, Kyren Williams fumbling going into the end zone, and then that 4th and 1 call, they just felt like they didn't take advantage of a home game when they should have not only won but won convincingly. And so this one was the reverse of that. This was them kind of figuring out their identity in the time between that first loss and the rematch, where they, it's letting Matthew Stafford cook, but not just to only two wide receivers. It's leaning into the tight ends. It's getting the offensive line healthy. And then just with all that getting better, you just feel like a sense of calmness with Kyren Williams and Blake Corum, where the ball security has been a lot better the past few weeks, and that had been a real problem early on in the season. And then you just have a defense that's kind of gelling too. The pass rush has been there all season, but the defensive backs are playing a lot better now than they were entering that matchup and in that first matchup. And so Mac Jones still had a really nice day on Sunday. They're not out of the woods. When they don't get the pass rush as much as they have in other games, they're going to give up some plays, but they made a lot of plays in that game too. And you go to like all the biggest plays, the most clutch crunch time plays in that game, they made them, and they made them in emphatic and explosive ways. And this was a team that felt like they knew they were pretty good, but they needed to measure up one game against the 49ers with a rematch and really show that, not just, okay, you go from losing to winning a game, but like stomp this team. And that's what they did. And that's why they're feeling pretty good.
Yeah, and good feelings across the board. It's making its way to the national media. Matthew Stafford is now in the running for the NFL MVP. Latest betting odds I saw was only behind one Drake May in his sophomore season doing his thing over there in New England. From your perspective, this offense has looked different from the beginning of the season to where they are now? Obviously, the 13 personnel, people are talking a ton about that. But what are you seeing specifically from Matthew Stafford, and how has he launched himself into this conversation as a legitimate MVP contender?
It's kind of interesting to think about his season so far, because after week 2, when they beat the Titans, the story I wrote out of that game was that this looks like the best and most comfortable version I've ever seen out of Stafford. And that's having covered some of his best years in Detroit and watched from afar, what he did a couple of years ago to lead the Rams to the Super Bowl. And that's sort of what Davante Adams said just on Sunday. He said he thought he's been playing at an MVP level all season long. And he pointed to the response he had in that Tennessee game, which is what I was writing about, which he throws a really bad pick in the second quarter, and it just doesn't throw him off at all. In fact, it makes him dial in more. And so I think everything that's happened since then, the reason it's really exploded is everything around Stafford has gotten better. Early in the year, it was just spamming the ball to Puka Nacua and Davante Adams, who are amazing players, but the connection with Adams wasn't really sharp. They weren't connecting in the red zone. Now they are. Puka Nacua was just lighting the world on fire, but then we saw 3 different injuries as a result of that. And so to be able to keep Nacua healthy, they had to change something up. And so they just sort of found a way schematically to lean even more into the 13 personnel, which got Terrence Ferguson on the field, that got another player who's got a lot of athleticism and feels like once a game he's either scoring a touchdown or a 30-yard catch. And really the biggest difference, though, to me is the offensive line's healthy. So if you look for every game until this past one, they did not start and finish with the same line in any game.
Wow.
And so they've had multiple games without Steve Avila at left guard, multiple games without Rob Havenstein at right tackle. And it just affects a little bit of everything, where Stafford, the moment he sees pressure, he's just kind of dirtying the ball. He is living to fight another down. But those do turn into incompletions, and those have turned into third down misses and drives that stall out in the red zone. They've gotten that out of it. The run game has taken off, just the continuity of those 5 players. And like I said, the way that's let the backs feel like they don't have to press quite as much in short yardage. I think if you look at a couple of those fumbles where they're either right at the goal line, they're short yardage, some of the worst plays have been when they felt like they had to overcome something up front. They no longer have to do that. So you've just got a play caller, an offensive line, running backs, tight ends, and Davante Adams have just all found their way. And what's interesting about that is Puka Nacua said that's still Stafford elevating everybody, is that he's going to put you in those positions. And now guys are playing with the confidence of being able to deliver in those situations. And they've got enough levers to pull right now where there's not really a good answer to defending this team. You double Puka Nacua, they're going to go to Davante Adams. You double Davante Adams when he's the sole receiver. They've got 3 tight ends and they run play action. They've just found answers to just some of the small miscues that were going on early in the season, and they were small. They were moving the ball, but they just weren't totally finishing it with touchdowns. And now the touchdowns are just coming in bunches. First time ever Stafford has thrown 4 touchdowns in back-to-back games. He's done it in 3 straight now, and he's the only quarterback ever to have 4 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions in 3 straight games.
Yeah, it's such an amazing stat. Is that since the merger, or is that just all-time NFL record? I mean,
they weren't really throwing the ball a lot before the merger, so I think it's all time. But yeah, the NFL put that out and ESPN put that out. So yeah, I was a little surprised to see that, but I think it's the mix of consistently throwing that high of volume and never turning it over. Like, I'm sure there's other guys that have had the touchdowns, but to do that and not turn it over is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, coming in the last couple of seasons, I really thought that Kyren Williams was kind of a straw that stirs the drink for the offense. And it was always kind of a back and forth with McVay about whether he believed in the running game or not. And, there's the questions about Kyren Williams' explosivity on the offense, period, that are, I think are legitimate. Blake Corum's taking on some of that. But it seems like in this transition to this kind of new feel of offense, what you're saying about, them not having to do so much, it feels more like a 2021 year where they didn't have a running game, but they still won a Super Bowl. And it's been an interesting evolution for me, because I was like, Kyren Williams is picking up 4 or 5 yards a carry, let's say in 2023 and sometimes in 2024. And then that stopped working. And so it's been interesting to see the evolution where now it's just a complementary piece of the offense, and it's now being driven down the field by Stafford. Talk about driving down the field. I think his average depth of target is one of the deepest of his career, certainly in a Rams uniform, which is pretty incredible for the guy. Big game coming up. It seems like everybody's talking about this as the clash of the Titans, the two best teams in the NFL heading into week 11. Seahawks versus the Rams. What are you looking at heading into this game in terms of the preparation, in terms of, hot matchups? Are there keys that you're looking into that might be the deciding factors in this game?
Yeah, I think this is going to be probably easily the biggest test for the pass defense that they faced. Sam Darnold is just lighting it up. We thought he had a great year last year. Then it started to tail off the game before he faced the Rams in the playoffs, and then did not play well in that game and got sacked a whole bunch of times. And this year, what's different is he's playing so much better under pressure. It just seems like they've married the scheme up, and maybe just getting a year back as a starter that went pretty well. He was able to really dial in on one specific area, but he's just not rattled under pressure the way that he was last season earlier in his career. And part of that is having Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's just always open and always catching everything. He's doing something right now a little bit more than we've seen out of Puka Nacua, where it's like high volume catches, but also the explosiveness running away from people down the field, like the 40-yard touchdown he had last week. So that's what's going to be really hard, is them figuring out a way to handle him, because I think their DBs have come a long way from early in the season. I had concerns against the 49ers and Colts and Eagles, but Emmanuel Forbes has really turned it on, making plays on the ball, just play with a lot more aggressiveness and cleaning up some of the tackling issues. And Kobe Durant, I think, filled in well, and you don't hear his name as often as you would expect. And then there were times last week Darius Williams didn't play very much, and then he gave up a touchdown. But before that, he was coming off the shoulder injury. Before the shoulder injury, he'd really turned his season around from a guy that they didn't want to play to start the year to a guy that's playing a lot and playing pretty well. But this challenge is a lot bigger, because you look the last few weeks, you got a backup quarterback in Mac Jones. They got a quarterback in his first ever start in Tyler Shook. They got a backup quarterback in Tyler Huntley in Baltimore. And so the only normal starter they faced is Trevor Lawrence, and the Jaguars are not totally humming on offense, certainly not the way that the Seahawks are. So Jackson's going to get his, like this. You can't go in expecting that you're going to just take him away. That if that was out there, someone would have done it already. So it's just not going to happen that way. But they have to keep him from getting those explosive gains that turn into touchdowns. You need to make them drive through the red zone, make them drop back more, because the pass rush ultimately still has to win the day, where Sam Darnold has made a lot of improvements under pressure, but I don't know that he's faced a pass rush like this one, because I don't think there's many out there that are as good as this one. And so what the 49ers is, they just threw quick. Kyle Shanahan always seems to kind of have an answer specifically against the Rams, and he did that again. So maybe the Seahawks will try that, but that's not the style that they've played with, where they want to be explosive and they want to let Jackson develop his routes down the field. So the pass rush has to get to Sam Darnold, because I think this, while the DBs are much improved, until they get Ahkello Witherspoon back, I still think this is a defense that needs that pass rush to hum. It's the lowest paid defense in the NFL, and all the resources are kind of up front. And so that's going to have to be the group that's going to win, that has to win. And I think they're going to come out strong this week, though, because I feel like they felt like they got taken out of their rhythm last game. They just never really got one sack to turn into two. They weren't hitting the quarterback. This week, I think they'll come in with a little bit more juice, and they need to, because if they don't, it's going to turn into a shootout. And we haven't seen the Rams have to win one of those recently, but I do feel at some point this season they're going to have to show they can win one.
Yeah, no, that's great points on the offense for sure, for the Seahawks offense. I always worry about teams against the Rams that have multiple tight ends or multiple guys that they are able to get the ball out quick to. And I'm looking at AJ Barner. I'm looking at Elijah Arroyo in this game, see if they're going to be big factors for the Seahawks offense for sure. And it's going to be a true test on the ground, I feel like, as well, with Kenneth Walker back there who could break one at any time. Switching over to the defense, something that caught my attention, switching to the Rams defense specifically over the last two games, they haven't lit the world on fire. And I wonder if that's in part due to the fact that they haven't had to, that the offense puts them out in front by, 20 points in the last three games. So they haven't had to get a stunning amount of pressure. Just wrote down a couple of pressure stats against San Francisco: 16 pressures per PFF, 8 against the New Orleans Saints, compared to 37 against Jacksonville, 26 against the Ravens, 17 against San Francisco the first time. You get where I'm going with this. Is this something they can just switch back on, or is it scheme dependent, or is it, have you noticed anything on the defense, specifically on the defensive line that you've noticed is any different?
I just think this happens in this league where when a pass rush strings together multiple games of just wrecking the offense, coordinators do anything they can to prevent that from happening, even if it means we just have to throw quick. We have to try and string these drives along and make it work that way. And so I think that's been the biggest thing the past couple of weeks is teams are throwing quicker, but they are finding some guys across the middle of the field. I think the more middle of the field targets you have, that's going to help you out in this kind of matchup. The Rams linebackers, they don't put a lot into that group, and Nate Landman's been incredible in run defense, and he punches the ball out just about every game. But I think he's started to show he started out the year pretty well as a coverage guy, but that's not as much that's not exactly why he's here. And there's some limitations there when teams have been able to get Troy Reeder on the field. That's been a troubling matchup. So Omar Spate's dealing with the injury a few games ago, and then working back from that has been a little bit of a factor. But yeah, I just think the offenses are throwing quick and they're able to do that. But if you can keep a big lead on teams, which I don't expect this week, but if you can keep a lead on teams, if you can keep scoring and making them answer your scores, it just kind of becomes a ticking time bomb. And they did make some plays in the Saints game. They didn't really make that happen against the 49ers, but that matchup, I'm always just going to, chalk up a little bit to Sean McVay or to Kyle Shanahan. He just always seems to find answers. And so when they did get pressure that first game, kind of fourth quarter and overtime against the 49ers, I think Kyle Shanahan, he knew he couldn't do the exact same thing this time. He switched up a little bit and threw quicker. And so I think that's the biggest thing. Maybe a little bit is, Byron Young was on like a 20-some sack pace early in the season. Maybe that was just probably just natural to come down a little bit. I don't think Jared Verse played his best game last week, but he was also going up against Trent Williams. So some of it's just been certain matchups and some natural regression to it. But they still have a lot of guys. Braden Fisk is getting healthier, and he had his first sack against the Saints. We haven't seen Kobe Turner as much lately, but he's been a productive player in his career. And then you mix in Verse and Byron Young. I still think it's going to be too many options for other teams to defend against. That is, if they can cover enough, if they can take away some of those middle of the field targets, and that's going to be the key matchup in this one.
Yeah. Jared Verse, he's probably the chirpiest player I've ever witnessed in person. He will smack talk just about anyone, but heading into that last game, he had a quote about Trent Williams where basically he was like, I'm not going to say anything about that guy. I'm not going to attempt that fate at all. Switching over to the Seahawks defense, leading the league in pressure rate. Stafford, if there's one thing you could point to statistically, is his pressure stats dropped significantly. 17th in completion rate against win under pressure. And 7 yards per attempt. So he's still, trying to push it down the field. He's been under pressure, just 34% so far this year. You mentioned that he's dirting balls, so that's affecting that if he's seeing pressure. Is this serving as some sort of kryptonite, do you think, in this week? Do you think that the Seattle is going to be maybe the toughest test from a pass rush that Stafford's seen all season?
Yeah, it's up there. I thought week 1 against the Texans was a really tough matchup with, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. And that was a game where both guards are kind of rotating in and out with injuries. And you felt it in that game. Like that was the game where Stafford's really dirting a lot of balls and avoiding disaster. But, they put up 14 points because they just weren't, they weren't really able to go up and down the field and avoid that pressure throughout the game. I think the health of the offensive line is just absolutely huge right now. Their depth is fine in some areas, but the starting group is, they're starters for a reason, and we're seeing them play really well together. And I think the move to 13 personnel also has helped that out a little bit, because sometimes you have an extra inline blocker as a tight end, and sometimes it's just getting a very quick answer to an uncovered player in running more play action, which that always helps the offensive line out rather than just the straight drop back type of stuff. So I think they're going to have to keep the play action up this week, because these guys are tough. I mean, these guys have done it for a long time, like DeMarcus Lawrence and Leonard Williams. They've gotten after it for a very long time, and they're going to have the edge in a matchup way against the Rams tackles. But you throw in the 13 personnel, and this is where running the ball is key too, because if you can consistently get into, 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 5 or 3rd and 2 or shorter, you can make teams guess about, whether you're running or passing. You can use play action. I think the issue is, in some games, the Texans game stands out this way, where there are just a few too many obvious pass downs that let those Texans and edge rushers win the matchups and know they were going to win the matchups off the snap. So keeping Kyron Williams and Blake Corum a big part of this is going to help out. But I also just think Stafford, he's gotten a little better at learning to play under pressure in this version of him. Back in the day when I covered him in Detroit, he would just take all these hits, and he would stand in there and deliver a strike and just deal with the pain of that. Or he would, when he'd scramble, he'd take off down the field and add some yards as a rusher. He's not doing that stuff anymore, but I think he realized early in the season, if you're not going to do any of that and you're just going to dirt the ball every time, there's going to be times when the pass rush doesn't have to dominate and they can still win. If you're going to be a statue that's just not going to hold on to the ball, but you need to, that can be an issue. So I thought last week he just showed it just enough on the scrambles. One of those touchdowns, for some reason, the defender bit as if he's going to actually take off. But there were a couple of plays like that where he's able to just get away a little bit. He is 37. And but he's not, like a total Joe Flacco, Aaron Rodgers, total statue in the pocket. Like he's realizing there's just a little bit he can do to get away from pressure and either spring open a tight end or throw the ball away. And he's given himself that option of seeing that if that play develops, rather than instantly dirt it the second he sees a guy. And that's helped out too. But it'll be tougher this week because the Seahawks have a super fast defense that's harder to do that against than like the backups of the 49ers and a very beat up front that they face there. So that will be key to watch. And you're right. If you're going to throw Stafford off his game, it has to come with pressure. Coverage isn't enough when he has this many options between the tight ends and Puka and Devontae. If you blitz him right now, he is just shredding the blitz. That's what super high level veteran quarterbacks do. So you have to just generate natural pressure. The Seahawks are pretty built to do that, but the Rams feel like between 13 personnel and a healthy offensive line and Stafford moving around a little bit, that they can handle that well enough. So I don't think they're going to, dominate in pass pro this week. That would be pretty surprising, but they need to come close to a draw in this matchup. And if they do that, I think Stafford's going to continue to do what he's been doing, which is MVP play.
Man, I know you got another thing to do. You've got a lot to talk about with Stafford and the Rams offense playing like this. So I can't thank you enough for joining us here. Tell the lovely Rams fans how they can find you, where they should look for your stuff.
Yeah, so I'm at The Athletic, and so, through our app and through the New York Times. So we have stories that go there about, 3 or 4 a week in that way. And then on, active on social media. So it's at Nate Atkins _ We're, live tweeting everything, tweeting out the stories, tweeting out the videos, and just trying to dive all the way in on a team that's it's pretty good right now and pretty fun to be around, and pretty big game this week too. So I'm excited for it.
Did you have any idea that the Colts are going to look like this?
No, there's nobody that did. And I think as optimistic as they were in the building, I don't think they thought it would look like this. Not this way of Daniel Jones playing it. And he's fallen off a little bit the past 2 weeks, but looked like an MVP candidate. And then Jonathan Taylor, as much as everyone loves him, I mean, and he's a great player. Like he's doing what Saquon Barkley did last year, which I didn't know would be repeated. And then here we are a year later and they're doing it. So yeah, it was nice of them to get really good right when I left. But the Rams are also, I think on that same level right now. So, it's hard to complain too much.
Yeah, maybe you got a familiar Super Bowl to cover in San Francisco.
Yeah,
well, everybody, I appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Like and subscribe to Rams LAFB on YouTube. Definitely, if you're not subscribed to The Athletic, I don't know if you're a real sports fan, so go do that. And Nate is a fantastic follow on Twitter. So definitely go check that out as well. Appreciate you guys, and we will see you soon next time coming up on Thursday at the very least. So stay tuned.
Ramley, thank you so much for hanging out with us and watching the Rams LAFB show. Quickly before you go, got to tell you about our friends over at Sleeper. It's the #1 sports app right now, and you've got to download it because it's got so many great features that I want to tell you about. Aside from season-long fantasy, which is the best in the business, they've also got live score trackers, in-game updates, plus the live chat where you can actually communicate with other users right on the app. But perhaps the best feature, at least that I like, is the daily fantasy feature or the live pick'em. Just pick 2 to 8 players across any sport, baseball, basketball, hockey, obviously football and our Rams. You're going to choose a player, just choose more or less. Matthew Stafford, more or less passing yards. Kyron Williams, more or less rushing yards, more or less touchdowns. 2 to 8, you can win real money. So when you go to make your first deposit, make sure you use our promo code RAMSLAFB. And Sleeper's going to give you a match bonus up to $100. So you deposit $100, they're going to give you $100 free. You're now sitting at $200. You put in $10, they're going to match you $10. You're now sitting at $20. But on top of that, right now, Sleeper is offering all new user signups a $20 free entry, no deposit required. Go sign up. You're automatically invested $20 straight from Sleeper. But you can stack that offer with that match bonus offer to add more money. Just make sure to use that promo code RAMSLAFB. Go check out Sleeper. Download it today. Tell them the guys at the Rams LAFB sent you. And as always, Ramley, thank you so much for making us a part of your day.